Hello everybody, and welcome back to Lost Planeswalker. You are here with me, Jesse, the Lost Planeswalker, and today we're talking about Nashi, Searcher in the Dark. This is a very cool Rat Commander deck, and it's actually a deck one of my friends built. I did a little bit of editing to drop the size down, because he had about 25 to 30 cards to cut from it, but it is a very cool commander. So let's get right in and see how Nashi works. Nashi, Searcher in the Dark, is blue and a black with Menace. And whenever Nashi deals combat damage, you mill that many cards based on his power. And any enchantment and or legendary cards you may put into your hand, which is a very cool ability. And if you decide to put everything into the bin, then he gets a +1/+1 counter. So there's a lot of different ways you can go around building this deck. You want to put equipment on it, or as enchantments, those are very good. Lots of other ways to buff up Nashi. Blue and black doesn't have as many +1/+1 counters, obviously, as like a green and white deck, but it provides a lot of cool stuff. So the way that my friend designed this deck, and I'm going to read it the way that he has it, is he has a backup beater that is a kind of co-commander you can use in the deck that works very well. You have beat stick cards, you have card advantage, evasion, lifelink protection, ramp, removal, utility, and lands. He did a really cool thing here where he basically did everything is either enchantments or legendary, so you can either decide to put whatever you want into your hand and everything else into the bin. There's ways to reanimate it. So let's dive right in and see how this deck works, starting out by looking at the backup commander. We have the Ancient one, which is blue-black legendary creature spirit god with Descend 8. The Ancient one can't attack or block unless there are 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, and for 2 blue and a black, draw a card, then discard a card. When you discard a card this way, target player mills cards equal to its mana value. The Ancient one here would be a great backup commander because it's a big powerful card, and we are going to be able to mill a ton of things with our commander, so it's going to be online very quickly. So now let's move into those beat sticks or equipment and auras that are really going to buff up our commander and make it so we can get through and deal a ton of damage, allowing us to mill a ton of cards. The 3 I want to show off here are Blackblade Reforged, Endless Screams, and Excalibur Sword of Eden. Blackblade Reforged, of course, 2 generic legendary artifact equipment with equipped creature, gets +1/+1 for each land you control. You can equip it to a legendary creature for 3 or equip it to a normal creature for 7. Now we're focusing really only around legendary creatures, so this is going to be a great card to buff up our commander. Endless Screams is an older card that I think is quite neat, but for X and a black, you enchant a creature, and enchanted creature gets +X/+0. Now, this card has been errated, and it is Scream counters are placed on it equal to X, so this is a great way to buff up just power. And then Excalibur Sword of Eden, 12 generic. This spell costs X less to cast, where X is a total mana value of historic permanents you control, which we're going to have a lot of. And then equipped creature gets +10/+0 and has vigilance, and equipped creature has to be legendary here. So really, we're not going to care too much about that because, like I already said, we're only going to be playing legendary creatures in this deck. So Excalibur here is quite powerful. Some of the other big beat sticks we have is Ace's Baseball Bat, Anduril, Narsil Reforged, Hand of Vecna, Nerd Rage, Shadow Spear, Sting the Glintering Dagger, and Tenza Godo's Maul. We have card advantage, and there's a couple cards here that are just pure card advantage. So we have Ballad of the Black Flag, Rona Herald of the Invasion, and the One Ring. Ballad of the Black Flag, 1 blue, and it is a enchantment saga with 1, 2, and 3, mill 3 cards. You may put a historic card from among them into your hand, and 4 historic spells you cast cost 2 less to cast. A very great way to fill up our hand with those artifacts, sagas, and other legendary cards, and then making them all very cheap to cast. Rona Herald of the Invasion is a staple card right now in some standard decks, because for 1 and a blue, you get a legendary creature, human wizard, that whenever you cast a legendary spell, untap Rona Herald of Invasion. You can tap them to draw a card, then discard a card, and then for 5 in a Phyrexian black mana, you can transform them into Rona Tolarian Obliterator. Legendary creature, Phyrexian wizard with trample. When a source of damage to Rona Tolarian Obliterator, that source's controller exiles a card from their hand at random. If it's a land card, you may put it on the battlefield under your control. Otherwise, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. Whether you're just playing this for the first side, getting some additional card advantage when you cast your legendary spells, or flipping it over and then being able to deal some damage. This is a really cool card. And of course, the One Ring, very expensive card right here. I think it's over $100 or very close for generic legendary artifact Indestructible. When the One Ring enters battlefield, if you cast it, you gain protection from everything until your next turn. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burden counter on the One Ring. Then you may tap it and put a burden counter on the One Ring, then draw a card for each burden counter on the One Ring. This is a format staple card. It's so powerful. That $100 price tag is deserved, because if you have ways to manipulate this and untap it, you can draw lots and lots of cards, and really you're going to put yourself in a position that if you have the One Ring out there and nobody can deal with it, you're going to be in a much better position to win the game. Some other card advantage cards here are Combat Research, Matsulatani, the Great Door, and the Overflowing Well. Moving right along, we have Evasion, because we definitely want to get through with our commander, so here's some great cards to let us do so. We have Aqueous Form, Cover of Darkness, and Demonic Embrace. Aqueous Form, one of my favorite single blue enchantment auras. Enchant creature can't be blocked, and whenever you attack, you scry 1. It's cheap, it's effective, and I love it. Cover of Darkness, 1 in a black enchantment. As Cover of Darkness enters battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures of the chosen type have fear. So this is a reprinted card from a long time ago, and it's actually quite affordable now compared to what it was before. But fear means they can't be blocked except by artifact creatures and or black creatures. Now, if you're playing a commander pod, there's probably a likelihood that somebody doesn't either have artifacts or black creatures, but there are a lot of artifacts and cards that make artifact creatures, so, you know, this is powerful, but there's probably still a chance that you're not going to be able to get through sometimes just playing this card. And then Demonic Embrace, 1 black, enchantment aura, enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +3/+1, has flying, and is a demon in addition to its other types. And you may cast Demonic Embrace from your graveyard by paying 3 life and discarding a card in addition to paying its other costs. This is a really cool card because you can get it back basically as many times as you can pay the additional cost here, which I think is a great option. The other evasion cards are Aether Tunnel, Arcane Flight, Arcanum Wings, and Smoke Shroud. Now, before we dive right back in and look at those Lifelink cards that you should put in this deck, I would just like to say, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. It would mean the world to me. In addition, I just started a Patreon. If you like the content I make and want to support me that way, that would be amazing. Or if you just want to follow along, I'm going to be posting all kinds of polls asking for listener suggested information, whether that's decks you want to see or videos you want to see. I'm really trying to make content that I think you guys will enjoy, and if you guys have any input on what you'd like to see, that's where I'm going to be doing all that, so I'd really appreciate it if you check it out. Now, let's dive right back in and look at that lifelink. So the 3 lifelink cards we have here are Cartouche of Ambition, Mask of Grizzlebrand, and Whip of Erebos. Cartouche of Ambition, 2 in a black enchantment, Aura Cartouche, enchanted creature you control. When Cartouche of Ambition enters battlefield, you may put a -1/-1 counter on a target creature, and enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has lifelink. This is kind of a 2-for-1. If your opponent has a smaller creature or something that you want to reduce in size, you can do that, as well as buffing your creature and giving it lifelink. Mask of Grizzlebrand is one of my personal favorite cards. 1 black, legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature has flying and lifelink, and whenever equipped creature dies, you may pay X life, where X is its power. If you do, draw X cards. There's a lot of upside here. We're going to be having a really big commander, so if it ends up dying, we can pay a ton into it to be able to fill up our hands. And then Whip of Erebos, 2 black, legendary enchantment artifact. Creatures you control have lifelink is probably the ability most people are going to use, but for 2 black, you may tap it and return a creature card from a graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste, exile it at the beginning of the next end step, and if it would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. Activate this ability only anytime you could activate a sorcery. I think that part of the card is underplayed and could actually be pretty great for our deck. Now moving on, we have some great protection pieces that are going to keep our commander around and prevent our opponents from wanting to attack into us. So the 3 cards I want to bring up are Agent of the Shadow Thieves, Gerald's Hourglass Pendant, and Lost in the Maze. Agent of the Shadow Thieves is 1 in a black legendary enchantment background from the Commander Legends Battle of Baldur's Gate set. Commander creatures you own have whenever this creature attacks a player. If no opponent has more life than that player, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. It gains Death Touch and indestructible until end of turn. We're already going to have a big creature. It might have Trample. Death Touch and Trample are a deadly combo. In addition, giving our commander indestructible means that most people are going to just let it through instead of losing a bunch of stuff on their board. Gerald's Hourglass Pendant is a single mana legendary artifact with flash. If a player would begin an extra turn, that player skips that turn instead. 4 and tap, exile Gerard's Hourglass Pendant, return to the battlefield tapped all artifacts, creatures, enchantments, and land cards in your graveyard that were put there from the battlefield this turn. Most likely, we're going to use this to get our commander back onto the battlefield and then re-equip it with a whole bunch of different auras that, possibly went to the bin as well. And lastly here, we have Lost in the Maze. X blue enchantment with flash. When Lost in the Maze enters the battlefield, tap X target creatures, put a stun counter on each of those creatures you don't control, and then tapped creatures you control have hexproof. This not only works as protection for our board, but it works as a really good way to stun down your opponent's creatures, keeping them locked for an additional turn. Some of the other protection-oriented cards we have in this deck are Dissipation Field, Eel Umbra, Hammer of Nazan, Mithril Coat, No Mercy, Penman's Aura, Propaganda, and Vow of Malice. Now, let's look at some ways you can ramp in this deck, because blue and black aren't really known for ramping, but there are some good cards, and a lot of them that have come out recently that allow us to do so. Cards like Copy Land, Crystal Skull of Issue Spyglass, and Liliana of the Dark Realms are some of them. Copy Land, 2 and a blue enchantment. You may have Copy Land enter the battlefield as a copy of another land on the battlefield, except it's an enchantment in addition to its other types. What we really like about this is because this is an enchantment, if we were to mill it, we can instead put it into our hand, and like we'll see later with the other lands that are legendary, this one is an enchantment, so it's going to be a great way to be able to ramp early. Crystal Skull, Issue Spyglass, 2 blue, legendary artifact. You may look the top card of your library anytime, and you may play historic lands and cast historic spells from the top of your library. You can also tap this to add a blue, a great way to get some card advantage off the top of our deck. And then Liliana of the Dark Realms, 2 black, +1, search your library for a swamp, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle your library. -3, target creature gets +X or -X until end of turn, where X is the number of swamps you control. So we can either use this as removal for our opponent's stuff or buff up our own commander. And then -6, you get an emblem with swamps you control, have tap, add black to your mana pool. This is personally one of my favorite cards. Liliana is just so powerful here. I think that this version also doesn't get enough attention, letting you, get swamps. If you're playing a mono black deck or a Dimir deck that doesn't have a lot of ramp, this is a great way to do it. Some other great ramp cards are Anarkir the Traveler, Sword of the Animist, the Celestis, the Iron Crag, and the Mind Stone and the Weak Stone. Now, we wouldn't be playing blue or black if we didn't have some great removal or things to make our opponent's creatures wish they were dead instead. So we have Amphibian Downpour, Frogify, and Witness Protection. Amphibian Downpour, one of my favorite cards from Modern Horizons 3, 2 and a blue, enchantment aura with flash and storm, enchant creature. Enchanted creature loses all abilities and is a blue frog creature with base power and toughness 1/1. One of the reasons this is so devastating is because it has flash and storm, meaning that if your opponents are casting a ton of spells on your turn, you can take advantage of their storm count that they've built up to cast this and be able to do that. We also have a lot of really cheap things in our deck, like Frogify and Witness Protection, that we could cast the same turn to get multiple triggers of Amphibian Downpour. Frogify, very similar to Amphibian Downpour in how it just turns a creature into a frog with base power and toughness 1/1. And then Witness Protection, single blue, enchantment aura, enchant creature. Enchanted creature loses all abilities and is a green and white citizen creature with base power and toughness 1/1 named Legitimate Business Person. Some other really great removal pieces we have are Adric the Mathematical Genius, Capture Sphere, Urtai Resurrected, Its Throw Metamorphosis, Into Deep, Kasmina's Transmutation, and Status Field. Next up here, I want to look at some utility creatures and enchantments that are going to give us some big advantage. We have Emery, Lurker of the Loch, Massacre Girl, Known Killer, and Quest for the Necropolis. Emery, Lurk of the Loch, 2 and a blue, legendary creature, Merfolk Wizard. With this spell, costs 1 less to cast for each artifact you control, and when Emery, Lurk of the Loch enters, you mill 4 cards. You may tap Emery to choose target artifact card in a graveyard, and you may cast that card this turn. Now, for the most part, we have lots of equipment in this deck that we want to be casting and getting back from our graveyard, either being removed or milled, and there are certainly a lot of great hits that are going to give us a big advantage. Massacre Girl, Known Killer, 2 black, legendary creature, human assassin with
Menace, creatures you control have Wither, and whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, its toughness was less than 1, draw a card. This is going to give our commander Wither, meaning that creatures are not only going to die, they're going to give us card advantage, and if they decide to block with something big, we're going to put a lot of -1/-1 counters on it. And then Quest for the Necropolis is actually a card I have never heard about, but it's from Modern Horizons 3 for a single black enchantment. It's got landfall. Whenever a land enters, put a quest counter on it, and then 5 and a black, sack it. Put a creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under control. This ability costs 1 less to cast for the number of quest counters on Quest for the Necropolis, and we may activate this only as a sorcery. Very cool thing, get one of your creatures out, get one of your opponent's creatures out, and you can essentially do it for a single black mana, which I think is insane. Some other really good utility cards here we have is Confounding Conundrum, Estrid's Invocation, Leyline of Anticipation, and Mirror Maid. Now, I'm not going to read through all of them, but I'm just going to quickly show off all of the lands in this deck. Mark, the Lost Planeswalker, decided to include a ton of lands in this deck, focusing around legendary land, because with our commander, we can get them and put them right into our hand. I think that this is a genius strategy. Well, maybe not giving us the best lands at all times. There's certainly a lot of legendary lands that are very powerful and very good, so we are going to really never be missing a land drop in this deck, and if there was any additional ways we could play additional lands, that would be a really cool addition to this deck. But this land base is a little expensive at over $800 for what I typically like to build, and that's why I say the land base is up to you, because Mark may be able to afford this land base, or maybe that's just something he's brewing with, but it's very cool and it's a very solid idea, so I'd just like to show that off. And before we end, I would just like to say a big thank you to Mark the Lost Planeswalker again. This is an incredible deck. This looks super fun, and I'm sure I'm going to be playing up against it very soon, and can't wait to do so.
Now, before we dive into that wrap-up, I would just like to say there's an extensive backlog in the maybe board of this deck, and if that's something you'd be interested checking out, please do. I think there's over 75 cards, a lot of really cool stuff. Of course, in the description is going to be that deck list linking to this deck, but tell me what you think. Thank you for watching. Let me know, is there a different strategy you decided to go with in this deck? Are there some other really great cards that would work well with this strategy? Comment down below. I would love to see that. In addition, if you would please leave a like, share this video with a friend, and subscribe, that would mean the world to me, so thank you, thank you, thank you. And today's Scryfall card of the day is Griptide. When the sea god Thassa wishes to speak with the mortal, she does not issue a summons or grant a vision requesting a visit. The sea simply brings her guests before her. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you later, Planeswalkers.